Come on in, sit back and relax. You're listening to episode 217 of the WealthTech Today podcast. I'm your host, Craig Iskowitz, founder of Ezra Group Consulting, and this podcast features interviews, news, and analysis on the trends and best practices all around wealth management technology. I'm excited to talk about our two guests for this episode, both from BridgeFT. First is Joe Stenzlen, their CEO. Joe's been CEO for 2 years. I know Joe a long time. I met him way back when he was at SciVantage. He was head of product there for many years and moved into head of sales and marketing. At the time, they were acquired by Refinitiv in 2020. My second guest on the program is Jim Hayes, who is a strategic advisor for BridgeFT. He was a former Wells Fargo advisor, head of Wells Fargo Advisors, and head of Wells Fargo's Wealth and Investment Management Client Relationship Group. And before that, Jim was head of the Private Banking and Investment Group at Merrill Lynch. In this episode, we cover a lot of ground, including how BridgeFT pivoted from being a wealth management platform to an infrastructure play, an overview of their technology, including their multi-custodial data feeds, a suite of services like analytics reporting and billing all through a single API, and some of their abilities and capabilities they offer to clients, such as reducing development costs, as Joe mentioned, by up to 50%, and reducing development time by 3 to 6 months off their time to market for building wealth applications. All right, but before we get started, let's talk about tech stacks. Now, here at Ezra Group, we've seen literally hundreds of tech stacks from our RIAs, and let me tell you, most of them are loaded down with tech debt. So you shouldn't feel too bad about yours, but let's face it, tech debt is like a giant anchor holding down your business growth. If you want to free your firm for exponential growth, you should run, not walk, to our website, ezragroup.com, and fill out the Contact Us form. Our experienced team can evaluate your current tech ecosystem, deliver targeted recommendations, optimize your existing systems and operations, even run an RFP, and help you implement new software to get your firm to the next level. You can take advantage of our free consultation by going to ezragroup.com. A couple of quick housekeeping items. Please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And check out the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation. You can find that at investinothers.org. And now, let's kick this thing off. I'm excited to introduce my next two guests on the program. It is Joe Stenzlen, CEO of BridgeFT, and Jim Hayes, a BridgeFT strategic advisor. Guys, welcome.
Thanks, you, Craig. Thanks for having us.
So let's do a voice analysis here. Joe, say hi.
Hello.
That's Joe. And Jim, you say hi.
Hi.
Okay, so now we got our two voices here. So we usually do one, but I'm trying to expand the podcast a bit and do a little bit more people on the podcast. So we're going to have two. This is great. Joe, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Annapolis, Maryland.
That's an awesome place. But at least you're here on the East Coast with me, so you understand the weather.
Yeah. The winter is coming quick.
Yeah. Where are you, Jim?
Craig, I'm calling in from Jackson, Wyoming, and winter is already here.
Yeah. I've never been to Wyoming. I don't think I've ever had anyone on the podcast from Wyoming. So you are the first. You win the prize.
Great.
All right. So jumping in, Joe, give us and the audience a 30-second elevator pitch for BridgeFT.
Sure thing. BridgeFT is a wealth infrastructure platform that helps firms, any firm that's building a wealth management application, whether that's a wealth management firm, whether it's a wealth tech provider, whether it's a consultant, build their applications better, faster, and cheaper. So we provide infrastructure capability around data. So enterprise data management, we're essentially for the core custodial data, which is the lifeblood of most wealth management applications. We provide essentially an outsourced data lake with all of that information that allows you to fetch that and drive it over the API for integration into your applications, the services, and the things that you're building. We also have a suite of services that sit on top of that, analytics like performance and other types of analytics, advisor dashboard elements, billing engine, reporting engine that can all be utilized through the API. We're a headless platform to integrate into any other application. So firms that you utilize us could be wealth management firms themselves that are building their own advisor desktops or client portals. It could be turnkey asset management platforms that are building their own capabilities and platforms, or direct indexing platforms. They need the core data and the services, and then want to augment that with other advisor productivity tools like reporting and billing. And then it could be a wealth tech firm or fintech firm themselves. We have quite a few clients that utilize us, including firms like Zoe Financial and Income Lab and Dynasty Financial Partners, that all use our platform for a way to get the data into theirs, utilize our application ready services, so that they can focus on the things that really make their application and their business better, and not the core infrastructure, which is pretty much similar across the board and doesn't offer an opportunity for them to differentiate. So they can leave the heavy lifting to us, cut half the development bill out of their timeline and their cost, and focus on what really is meant to make them unique, rather than integrating yet another data feed.
I've said this before. I told it to you. I love the idea. I love what you guys are doing. Coming from Ezra Group and our incredible focus on integrations and data, hearing what you guys are doing really warms my heart, I have to say. But how did you get here? If you just do maybe 3 or 4 minutes on that, because BridgeFT was not a wealth infrastructure provider before you got there.
That's right. Yeah, I'll weave those two things together. So I started off my fintech life at Thompson Financial, I'm not going to say how many years ago. We built the wealth management group there. Actually touched paths with you, Craig, several different companies, actually.
Yes, weaved and bobbed and weaved through our career.
Yep, that's right. And actually, while I didn't know Jim back then, one of the things we did, we launched Wachovia's Smart Station platform. We launched Merrill Lynch desktop. So the Thompson One Wealth Management platform became the largest advisor used platform in the country, and still is fairly substantial today. I then went on to a startup. I sold that startup to a company called Cyvantage. Cyvantage was internet brokerage 1.0. So any firm that wanted to have an online internet brokerage, like we launched Trade King, we would help enable that. And so a lot of that was the same infrastructure that I talk about today, but we were also delivering the front end screens and the capabilities as a turnkey. And throughout that process, it was always a lot of effort and customization and professional services that we'd have to do on the front end, which indicated that the firms, and even more so today, want to have control of that, because that's their unique aspect. They want to control the experience that their advisor and their clients have. But the back end was actually the biggest part of the work for us. And so at the end of Cyvantage, we ended up selling Cyvantage, sold it to Refinitiv. And then the Cyvantage actually was spun out into the Beta Next Group as a follow-up. And while I was at Refinitiv thinking about what to do next, I had this concept of a WealthTech API, and I actually started building a business plan around it and searched for a couple places maybe to land it as a new opportunity. And an opportunity came across from a headhunter on the Bridge CEO search. Bridge had started life as you indicated, Craig, as a software as a service for financial advisors. They sold directly to the advisor. They sold a brand new tech stack, all API first, very lightweight front end running on AWS, used a third-party aggregation service, which became problematic over time. And so out of necessity, they built their own multi-custodial aggregation platform, integrated to all of the custody providers, and then migrated their 200 and some RIAs over to this platform. And around that time, the board was looking at the business, and they were raising around and said, well, perhaps we have a big opportunity in enterprise data management type service in wealth management, because if this had this big impact on us, and the impact was very large, like from a margin standpoint, from a customer sat standpoint, getting that data part right changed the whole thing, changed the whole business, which just shows how important the data foundation is. If that had that big impact on us, there's hundreds and thousands of firms that are out there that could leverage the same capability and value. So they decided to look for some folks to lead that charge, and that's where it came along to me, and it was a good match for this concept that I was already trying to pursue. So I took the job in January 22. Brought in a bunch of my trusted team here, and we had a 2-year plan to sort of convert the focus to an enterprise platform. We did it largely in 2022. And in 2023, we've continued to execute that with a lot of interesting brand names and wins along the way. And we're just setting up our 24 plan to continue into that. We think the challenge for us really is it's a huge market and a huge focus and the expanse of what we need to do. But the core fundamental foundation is there. The value that we're creating for these clients is very clear. And next steps on that are exciting, because if you think about it, Craig, the host of data that we have and all the value that could be in AI, machine learning, and analytics, that next layer of the cake is really the focus for us in the future and the value. The data as a start is one, enriching that data and helping it answer questions, provide guidance and what firms are looking for is the next step. And that's part of what we'll continue into the future.
That's an excellent description. Yeah, you pretty well summed it up nicely. So I want to pitch it over to Jim for a second. So Jim, with your background and experience in the industry, when you saw this that was being done and saw this platform, what was it about it that encouraged you to join and become a strategic advisor for this company?
Yeah, it's a great question, Craig. I've been on Wall Street about 35 years, and I've had a foothold in Silicon Valley for about 25 of those years. And I've always been interested in how technology can really enable the client and the advisor relationship. And when I met Joe and the Bridge team, I was really wowed by their tech and their capabilities, because I felt that it really addressed some of the problems that you see in the industry with large firms, as well as sort of on the innovation curve. And, just sort of broadly, large firms tend to have their innovation budgets crowded out a little bit by other priorities, regulatory, compliance.
Oh, yeah.
Items can be one area. Another challenge can be, legacy systems that tend to be a patchwork that are built over the years. Another sort of challenge that's out there is, how do you create a true end-to-end client experience that's integrated across multiple applications and manage through that? And what I found in BridgeFT was a firm that basically really thought about those problems as opportunities from the ground up. How to synthesize data, how to create an API and services layer, how to build speed of execution into the equation, and really do what they do and allow larger firms and other firms to do what they do best, which is sort of manage the client and the advisor relationship. And so in Bridge, what I found is a firm that had really thought about data and multi-custodial data, which I think is a big trend that's probably in the second inning of what it could be. Number one, and number two, that really enabled RIAs, broker dealers, wealth firms to really focus on sort of the front end innovation piece and what they do. And so I think the marriage of those two things does exactly what Joe said: better, faster, cheaper, and really, I would say, more accurate in terms of data and the cleanliness of the data that firms use. So it's been a great relationship, and really proud of what that team does and the momentum that they have.
I'm going to stick with you, Jim. So going back to your days, not very long ago, as CEO of Wells Fargo Advisors, what would you have done differently if you had this technology when you were there?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Without commenting specifically on Wells Fargo, I would say for any large organization that has a technology budget and has a complex business model, you sort of make the trade-off in your technology spend between keeping the lights on and maintenance type of technology versus, what are we going to innovate on? And I think, one of the things that big firms can generally do differently with technology like this is move away from a mindset of building everything internally, and instead build the value-added sort of, client pieces or the differentiated pieces internally, and outsource the pieces that are the infrastructure and the pieces that allow you to move more quickly. So one thing I would encourage really all large firms in this industry to do is consider what they need to build versus what they should buy, and look externally. And a good example of that is when you think of like financial planning tools, or you think of performance management tools, performance reporting, many firms had their own proprietary tools that were built up over the years. And what they've realized is there are actually really good providers out there that spend all their time and all their innovation dollars on those tools, and they develop them. And the trick then for the firm is to figure out, well, how do we integrate that so it's single sign-on, it's a unified experience and whatnot, and how can we get the data imported into that in a way that makes the output really accurate? And so it's a great marriage between speed of execution and innovation and getting things done quickly and doing what big firms do well, and relying on external partners for some of the infrastructure and ultimately some of the integration.
Jim, you took the words right out of my mouth. Right. I give this talk all the time because I get asked, which is better, build versus buy? And there's no answer. There's no build, yes, build, or no, don't build. It's, as you said, build where you can add value, build where you can differentiate, and buy everything else. There's no reason to buy infrastructure. There's no reason to buy necessarily a financial planning tool, as you mentioned, that does the basic financial planning options. If you want to build something specifically, and we've seen this, you know, I partner with Michael Keatsis on the Advice Tech Map, which you can find on keatsis.com. And we're seeing the explosions in specialized planning, very niche, narrow areas where people are building areas that are not the normal financial planning, normal Monte Carlo retirement expenses. It's things like Medicaid and college aid, college planning and such, taxes. So you're really hitting the nail on the head there.
Yeah, and I think it gives firms the opportunity to pick and choose an amalgamation of, you know, in the Keatsis chart, for example, there's a lot of choice out there. And then there's a lot of opportunity for an RIA or a broker dealer to then add their secret sauce to that and get sort of a win on both fronts.
I think if I might jump in, Craig, I think one of the unique things, though, is that all of that unique innovation out there and this concept of buy versus build, I think it's a false choice. I think the answer is really you need to build, but you know, when you build an application, you don't build Oracle. You know, you rent it. And so the technology tools that can be integrated and allow you to make a seamless application requires that you have API first headless capabilities so that you can stitch together inside your own concept of the customer journey through financial planning, but then leverage that unique technology around the specialized planning, as you mentioned, or whatever other service. And that's where I think large firms, particularly like the ones that Jim's been at, have to have that client experience and advisor experience unique to them in order for them to differentiate. It's hard to imagine, you know, the top two competing wealth management firms sending out the same exact financial planning report to all their customers and somehow say that they're differentiated in the financial planning they provide. So they have to put their stamp on it. But that doesn't mean they have to build the whole thing. They can start with the core services that are there. Whoever wants to build a Monte Carlo calculation, who wants to build a performance calculation, who wants to worry about an integrated data model, those things can be leveraged from a service like ours and others. It's really the stamp that they put on. This is the way that their firm is going to manage the journey with their customer that needs to be unique to them.
I want to shift gears just a second. Back to Joe. One of the things I like about the way you've designed your product, as you said, it's API only. It's a headless platform. That's really the way to go, in my opinion. But what are the downsides? Have you seen any downside? Was there any difficulty in switching? Because BridgeFT was really the opposite up until then. Was where we've got a front end, use our front end.
Yeah,
you're going. We don't have a front end. So it's a big shift in mindset and sales. How do you shift the business from we're selling this experience to we're just selling infrastructure?
There's a couple questions in there. From the challenge is that the readiness of firms to own that experience so that they're looking to take just the APIs. And they're out there. It's just that it used to be probably at the larger firms, and that bar is lowering. I like to say that our service helps lower that bar because you could have your own experience now, because if I can help cut 50% of the costs out, then you don't need the budget. But that lowering level is something that has to change over time. And I suspect that we'll continue to look and leverage development organizations, third-party development organizations that might be able to help use our platform to piece together for smaller firms that maybe don't have, you know, a bench of developers that are sitting there. But I believe very strongly that that bar is going to continue to lower because it's just part of what differentiates those firms. As far as changing the mindset, that's difficult, and quite frankly, it's not done, because it's thinking about it in a totally different way, and that's a growing pain that we've had in this migration that we've made. Is you see people saying, well, wait a minute, we shouldn't be thinking about it that way. We should be thinking about what the developer at the firm needs to do in order to enable that thing, rather than our own application. When you make your application headless, you think about it totally different, and you have to help your clients think about how they might integrate it, rather than focusing on UX and UI, which are a whole different discipline. So it's a big change, and it's a big change for firms to think about. But there's a strong pull demand in the marketplace for it, because firms are looking to and are actively building their own services. We found a real hot spot in the fintech market because of you're looking at the Kitces map. There's 500 firms are on there or something, and probably a full 75% of them could use or need our data. So for those firms, it's pretty lights out. If you've got $1 million to go build your product that you want to try to take to market, do you really want to spend 500,000 of that on integrating custodial data and core services, or would you rather focus that on whatever it is that you're building, making that more and more unique? And that's just the common theme. And that is a change of I'd say it's bigger than a change in our company. It's just a change that's happening in the market. And there's very good corollaries to that. I mean, this is what e-commerce is about. That's what happened with e-commerce. E-commerce is full of infrastructure. I like to say that we're going to do for wealth management what Stripe and Shopify did for e-commerce, and it's very much the same thing.
So would you change the name of the firm to BridgeFT?
that would have been a good one.
That's a free one. That's free marketing for you. You can take that and run with it.
I'm going to use that one.
I absolve all. I remove all of my ownership of that. Back to Jim. Thinking about the ability of firms, if a firm that were to use the BridgeFT platform, which is a single source of truth for multi-custodial data aggregation, how does that shift the mindset and the control away from vendors towards wealth management firms? Where if you're a wealth management firm, as you knew as Wells Fargo Advisors, sometimes the vendors kind of own you because they own your data. It's in their infrastructure. You got to ask them for it. It's in their proprietary format. They've taken it, and then you don't really own it as much. But if you have BridgeFT, if I could make a bold statement, you would own more of your data than you'd have that control. Do you see that? And how will that change the way wealth management firms think about their business?
Craig, that's a great question. I would say broadly the dynamics in the industry have been changing for about 15 to 20 years, where most of the power in the relationships at small firms and large firms is between the client and the advisor relationship, where it used to be that sort of the product approach was paramount. But products have proliferated so much that the real value that's exchanged and that results in revenues for firms is between the advice that's given and the advice that's paid for, sort of this mutual value exchange. So I think the first thing that BridgeFT does is it frees up budget at firms to basically focus on how do they enable that client and advisor relationship. The second trend that I see happening is, advisors more and more are recognizing that they need to charge explicitly for advice and demonstrate what's the value that they provide for the fee that's charged. And so one way that that's sort of playing out is this notion of sort of multi-custodial or fee for advice services, where in the past, an advisor might only charge a fee based on assets that they manage. Whereas what's begun to happen and is happening is advisors are now charging a fee on a total relationship. Mm-hmm. And they've always provided advice, but sometimes it's been subsidized by asset management or other things. Mm-hmm. So the analogy I think that probably holds pretty true is when you look at performance reporting and aggregated, performance reporting, that basically gives you a view across basically Wall Street for how a client's doing. If you were to take that and say, let's actually take our business practices and do those across the client relationship across the street and charge for advice, regardless of where the assets are held, I think it actually enables the advisor to deliver what they want to deliver. They want to be the lead advisor on the relationship. and they want to be compensated appropriately for giving advice across all the assets, regardless of where they're held. And the multi-custodial data and having that in sort of a seamless way enables them to do that.
Indeed. So same question to Joe. From your point of view, how do you see this changing? Will this give more power to wealth management firms if they have your platform sort of as an in-between layer between the custodians and the portfolio management vendors specifically?
Yeah, I like the word control. That's absolutely what it does. And oftentimes when we're talking to firms, they're considering doing it themselves, in fact, instead of another provider, because they're seeking that control. And we give them that control back without having to do the stuff that they don't really want to do. So I think that if you think about data as a core foundational platform, and then the old mantra about garbage in, garbage out being important, having access to that and having that understood is going to be critical to the success of what you're going to want to do next. And so that amount of control is important. Layering on top of that, the services that are provided is similar. There's things that you want to build that differentiate yourselves, and there's things that you don't need to, that it's going to be the same everywhere. And that's where we try to draw the line. And by doing that allows you to take, let's say it's 50% that there's a savings. It allows you to take, either lower the bar and do it for less cost, or dedicate a lot of those resources to the area that's really critical to unique in what you're doing, and spend more there to make that even better. So I completely agree.
I'm glad we're on the same page with that. Another area you mentioned, that your product or your platform is a wealth infrastructure that enables building apps. When a wealth tech firm, as you mentioned, the map that Michael and I work on is growing. Like we just had our meeting 2 days ago for the December map, and there's 8 more vendors, 8 more products that we're putting on the map. How long do you think it would take them to launch a new product built using the BridgeFT custodial component rather than building it themselves?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if you add it up, that's part of what makes it so compelling for us with wealth techs and fintechs, is that no matter how you cut it, it's going to take you 3 to 6 months to integrate any custodial source. And by the way the world works, your first client's going to be on one, your second client's going to be on another, your third client's going to be on another one, or they have all 3 coming right out of the gate. So that could stack up to be a couple of years of work, and you've got 3-4 developers against it. That's a pretty big check. With us, we've done all of that work. And so we expose to you the API, you get normalized single format data set across all the custodians that you're utilizing. You don't have to run a batch operation. You don't have to build a database infrastructure. You don't have to go make all of that connectivity, mapping, transformation to each one of them. And you get it fully normalized so your application only has to speak one language. Firms have that up and running with us with 3 months, depending on the nature of their application and how much and complicated it is. We've had firms actually have a beta version ready before they sign the contract, because we give people sandbox access as part of our sales process. So once we identify the use case and that we're a good fit, then we'll encourage people to get into the sandbox and start building. And we've had firms have POCs, done inside of 30 days. They've had their application integrated inside of 60, 90 days. So that's a big jump from them going down the road themselves. And the thing I like to say about it is, even if they went down the road themselves, they spent all that money and they did all of that, did they do anything different that added more value to them? No. Chances are they didn't do it as much, because that's all that we're focusing on. So it's from a fintech standpoint, it's a lights out scenario. The other angle there, Craig, is as we go along and we start building this network of these fintechs, and we're adding other data into that as well. The value for a land and expand and next step. So, for example, we just announced a partnership with Intrinio. So if custodial data is one of your first needs that you have in building a wealth tech application, market data is certainly number 2, if not reversed. So coming soon, Intrinio market data will be integrated to our API calls. So if you call a position call and you want to see that, I can now decorate that with an updated market value. I can give you the data around a quote that you might want to put in a quote hover in your app. I save you the time of having to do that, and you're now getting enriched extra value added data on top of it. So I think from that standpoint, it's no doubt faster, but the experience, our intention is that in the end, the experience is also richer.
That's important. One thing I think also needs to be said is that the custodians, even if you have access to them, even if you have the developers and the time, custodians are backlogged. You can't just get access to them and get their testing environment get in. They may make you wait for a year because we've been talking to the custodians and they're all backed up. So it's another advantage for you, because even if I wanted to build it, I may not even be able to, because the custodians don't have time for me.
That's right, and it's only getting worse. You just mentioned there's 8 more companies that are coming in the next month's report. Like, with all of that expansion, it's still the same firms. And by the way, those firms, the custodians, aren't necessarily generating revenue out of that, and so that's not going to get easier. I think that there's an opportunity for Bridge to act as intermediary and a bit of industry utility to help make that easier for even the custodians.
Indeed. All right, we're almost out of time. Jim, your thoughts in terms of being a strategic advisor, where do you see other trends moving in the broader market that are favorable to BridgeFT?
Yeah, I would say there's a host of them. I would say, I would say the trust business is getting more integrated into wealth tech stacks. Historically, trust applications were always separate because they needed principal and interest accounting. And so they were thought of as sort of this separate line of business apart from regular asset management. But sort of the secret in the industry is 60 to 70% of new business that's done with trust companies is agency only business, which is more similar to a brokerage type of platform. So I would say one trend is simplifying the tech stack by on the trust side, by having it look more closely to sort of a broker dealer type of tech stack. I think that's one trend. I think secondly, this trend towards independence. The independent shops have been gaining about 0.5 point of market share per year versus the large and intermediate sized broker dealers. The independent shops, when people set those up, they're looking for ways to differentiate themselves. And so I think that, Bridge gives them an opportunity to focus on what they do best and how they, differentiate their intellectual capital and thought leadership with the tech stack that supports it, is another big trend that's out there. And then I would say the third one that I kind of see out here is that, a lot of advisors that I talk to, I ask them a question: are you an investment advisor or are you a wealth advisor? And they all usually say they're a wealth advisor. And then you sort of get into the follow-up questions of, well, what do you do around planning, both comprehensive and episodic? What do you do around the banking side of the balance sheet, liability side of the balance sheet, and what do you do around insurance? One of the big trends that I see is that, and this has been said at a number of conferences, that planning is the new alpha. And so if you're really going to generate sort of great after-tax returns for clients, you're going to get close to them, you're going to understand their planning needs. The integration of the services needs to go not only across different investment providers, but across planning, investments, banking, and insurance. So it's one holistic sort of experience for the client. And they feel that no matter where things are custodied, they can make sense of it in a holistic point of view. So I think that's a trend that has been out there for a while, but it has a ways to go in terms of connectivity sort of horizontally across the industry.
Your comment about the trust business is so true. We see that a lot. Do you think, and one of the issues is that a trust account, opening an account on the trust platform is a lot more expensive than opening it on the agency platform, but firms just to default to the trust because it's there. So Joe, if they were connected to BridgeFT, would that make it easier to open up agency business from a trust standpoint? They wouldn't have to put it on the trust platform.
Yeah. So today we support that by wherever that data is coming from, and bringing that together for them. In the future, one of our initiatives is we're going to be tying in, similar to aggregating the data. We're going to be tying in and unifying some of the API sets that allow, I'll call it transactional and capabilities on those platforms. So like a unified account opening API against multiple custodians. So simplifying that process so that whatever you're building works. Certainly initially, right off the bat, we make that easier, having your brokerage data sit right alongside your trust data, and being able to live that way in your application on the same pane. And then in the future, as we go along, enabling functions and capabilities on that, like money movement and other sorts that are coming off those platforms. So as an application developer, you don't need to go and source that for 6 different back office or custodians.
I would like to get a hold of that because we're seeing issues where different vendors can't do things a certain custodian. So the ops team are constantly task switching, or rather constantly what we call swivel chairing.
Yeah.
They're on the portfolio management platform to do a rebalance, but then they got to jump over to the custodial platform to move money.
Yeah.
Can't just do it from one place. Or if they're journaling cash between accounts, they can't do it through the portfolio management platform. It doesn't have the capability.
Yep.
So it's causes operational headaches, I have to say, for larger firms, especially ones that are growing fast. So
yeah,
I
think there's going to be continued pressure on that, because what we're seeing, what you're talking about is the desire of unification of the experience. And in order to do that, the word single sign-on, aren't used for that. That's not how you need to actually have a single pane and interfacing with those systems behind the scenes to make that truly unified across that customer journey. As an example, what you mentioned, but why is there an onboarding application, a planning application, a managed account application, a service application? That's really all part of the same journey. And to get there, you're going to need to drive it with APIs and enable services to multiple disparate systems behind the scenes.
Man, I could keep digging and digging on this. There's so much here to talk about, but we are out of time. Joe, where can our listeners find out more about BridgeFT?
BridgeFT.com or on LinkedIn.
It's just that easy. Great. Joe and Jim, thank you so much for being here. I really learned a lot.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Joe.
Hey, it's Craig again. Here's my top 3 takeaways from this episode. BridgeFT used to be a wealth management tool. We were tracking them for many years, really competing with Orions and Tamaracks and Black Diamonds of the world. And then when Joe Stensland came in, they realized they needed to pivot. There are just too many of these vendors out there, and they did a smart thing. They became an infrastructure play, offering a normalized multi-custodial data feed and a suite of services like analytics, reporting, and billing, all available through a single headless API. And we like APIs here at Ezra Group. So big kudos to them. Their outsourced infrastructure enables firms to focus investments on different differentiated front-end experiences rather than building the plumbing. So it's a great business model. And they believe their impact can be tremendous on firms that are building out technology, cutting up to 50% off the development costs and 3 to 6 months off time to market for building wealth applications. All right, you've made it to the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. But before you go, please go to our website, EzraGroup.com, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and sign up for our newsletter. Once a month, you'll receive an email chock full of wealth management goodness, news, information, updates. You won't be disappointed, I promise. Thanks for listening, and talk to you all again next time.